I was just an ordinary guy, setting up chairs and glasses, when she walked straight toward me. The CEO everyone whispered about. She stopped right in front of me, her eyes filled with a panic that didn't belong on a face like hers, and whispered, "Pretend you're my husband. Just for tonight." And before I could even answer, she took my hand, and my whole life changed. The morning started with the soft creak of the apartment's baseboards and Lily's small hand patting his cheek. Daniel blinked awake to the gray light that slipped past the blinds and settled like dust on the dresser. He smelled yesterday's coffee in the air, the faint metallic note of coins in a jar by the sink. Rent reminded him of itself even before his feet found the floor. "Daddy, you forgot to smile," Lily said, her voice half playful, half instructing, as if joy were a chore they could simply remember to do. He tried, and the effort rearranged his face in a way that made her giggle. "There it is," she whispered, leaning her head on his shoulder. She had her mother's eyes, big, thoughtful, always searching his expression for the truth he tried to keep steady. When she squeezed his hand, he felt the quiet ceremony of it, a child blessing the day. The apartment was small but honest, 2 bowls drying on a towel, a sketch Lily had taped to the wall of a castle with flags that never sagged. He warmed oatmeal, stirring slower than he needed to so the spoon wouldn't clink and wake the ache in his chest. On the fridge, the hospital's discharge summary was clipped behind a grocery list, paper behind paper, time stacked on time. "You have work at the hotel again?" Lily asked, fishing a strawberry slice from her bowl. "Yeah," he said. "Big party. I'll be home late, but Mrs. Sanchez will stay until you fall asleep." Lily nodded, the practical way of someone older than 6. "Tell the party people they should dance," she advised. "That always fixes it." "What does it fix?" "Everything," she said, as if it were obvious. Then, quieter, "Don't be sad. Mommy's watching us." He swallowed the dryness in his throat. "I know," he said, and it surprised him that he meant it. There were days when grief hid in the edges of a lampshade or the space under the couch, and others when it sat at the table with them, asking about school. Today, it hovered like weather, present, but not in charge. He packed her backpack, checked the homework he already knew was done, and tucked an extra note inside. "You are brave and kind." The pencil pressed a little harder on kind. He wanted her to believe that goodness mattered in a world that often greeted you with a ledger. On the bus stop bench, he wrapped her in his jacket because the wind reached straight through the seams of her sweater. "I can't see my breath." "That means it's not too cold," she said, performing a cloudless exhale for proof. "Science checks out," he said, and she laughed into his collar. When the bus sighed to a stop, she climbed aboard, pausing on the second step to look back. He raised his palm. She matched it with her small one through the space between them, a silent high five they'd invented after the funeral when words kept breaking apart. Walking to the job, he counted miles by the rhythm of his boots. The hotel's loading dock smelled like wet cardboard and fresh paint. He hauled crates, measured table spacing with a tape that curled like a reluctant snake, and kept to the edges of conversations. He was good at invisibility. It let the hours pass without demanding anything except sweat. During lunch, he sat on an overturned bin and studied the shape of the ballroom from a distance. Chandeliers sprawled overhead like frozen fireworks. He imagined Lily pointing at them, naming each star. He pressed his thumb against the ridge of his wedding band. Still there, still a ring of thunder cooled into metal. Sometimes he considered slipping it into a drawer, but the skin beneath felt uncharted, and he could not bear new maps yet. He calculated the week in his head: overtime, groceries, rent, what was left for sneakers Lily had outgrown in silence. The math never smiled back, but he had her laugh stored like spare light. He held to it the way climbers hold to a narrow ledge, not because it was easy, but because it was something. When the foreman waved him over with a clipboard, Daniel wiped his hands and stood. Another set of chairs, another round of adjustments. He nodded, ready. Ordinary work, ordinary hours, and somewhere beyond the double doors, a world that would never notice a man like him, until someone did. By the time Daniel finished tightening the last screw on the stage risers, the sky beyond the hotel's glass atrium had darkened to a muted indigo. Inside, chandeliers dripped with light like frozen rain. The air smelled faintly of perfume, polished marble, and something distant. Money, maybe. Daniel wiped the dust from his hands onto his jeans and looked around. Everywhere he turned, there were reminders that he didn't belong. Velvet ropes, champagne pyramids, and the low hum of a world that never had to check gas prices. He had been told this was a charity gala, but watching the diamond cuffs flash and laughter bubble like carbonated water, he wondered what exactly these people gave to charity. Still, work was work. Overtime meant groceries, and groceries meant a week without worry. He adjusted a centerpiece, checking his reflection in a mirrored column, and caught the image of a man who looked older than 32 should. Tired eyes, rough palms, and a posture that had learned humility by necessity. Ramirez, the foreman, called from across the room. Make sure the east entrance looks perfect. CEO's coming through there tonight. Daniel nodded and moved to the doorway. He didn't care much who the CEO was. To him, CEO was just another word for someone who never had to scrub drywall dust from their clothes. But when she arrived, even he felt the shift in the air. Alexandra Hayes entered the ballroom as if the floor recognized her steps. The conversations dimmed, replaced by a low ripple of admiration and envy. Her dress was simple but cut to command attention, and her hair framed her face with deliberate precision. She carried herself like a woman who had spent her life in control of every variable, every line rehearsed, every glance calculated. Daniel, crouched beside a floral display, almost missed the flicker in her expression. When she paused near the entrance, something inside her composure cracked. A half-second of hesitation, eyes darting toward a cluster of suited men across the room. Her assistant hurried to her side, whispering rapidly. Daniel caught fragments between the clinks of glass. Your father, board members, where's your husband? Alexandra's jaw set so sharply he could almost hear the strain in her silence. She nodded once, dismissing the assistant with emotion that seemed too controlled to be calm. Daniel straightened, pretending to busy himself with a chair, but he couldn't help glancing back. The woman everyone admired looked, for one heartbeat, cornered. He'd seen that look before, on people about to lose something they'd worked their whole lives to hold. Maybe that was why, when her gaze swept the room searching for a lifeline and landed on him, he didn't look away. For reasons he couldn't name, he held her stare. She crossed the floor toward him, heels clicking like punctuation in the silence that followed her. Every eye trailed her path. Daniel froze, half expecting to be scolded for standing in the wrong place. Instead, she stopped barely a breath away, her perfume crisp and unfamiliar, and said softly, I need your help. He blinked. Ma'am. Her voice dropped lower, urgent but steady. Please, just for tonight, pretend you're my husband. For a moment, the noise of the ballroom disappeared. The words didn't fit the room or the moment, and Daniel wondered if he'd misheard. I'm sorry. Alexandra leaned closer. Her hands trembled slightly around her clutch, betraying the calm of her voice. If I walk in there alone, they'll tear me apart. My father, the board, they already think I can't lead because I'm single. Just stand beside me, nod when I introduce you, and stay quiet. I'll handle everything else. Daniel's pulse drummed in his ears. You've got the wrong guy, he said quietly. I'm nobody. I fix things and carry boxes. I don't have time to find somebody else, she said. And you look decent. Her eyes softened. Please. He hesitated. It was madness, dangerous even. But then Lily's face flashed in his mind. Her backpack strap fraying, the overdue rent notice on the counter, the quiet question she always asked before bed. Are we okay, Daddy? Maybe this was an answer, if only for one night. He nodded, almost against his better judgment. What do I have to do? Just stay beside me, she whispered, adjusting his tie with a quick, trembling motion. And don't look afraid. Daniel swallowed. You first. Her mouth curved into the faintest, exhausted smile before she took his arm. Together they stepped through the ballroom doors, lights spilling around them like a curtain lifting. The music faltered, conversations paused, and every eye turned to watch the couple no one expected to see. And for the first time in years, Daniel Ramirez, the man who built other people's stages, found himself walking across one. The room seemed to inhale when they entered. Dozens of faces turned in synchronized surprise. Board members, journalists, donors, each one calculating the story behind the sight of Alexandra Hayes walking in hand with a man no one recognized. The string quartet faltered, the notes wobbling before steadying again. Daniel's pulse thudded in his ears, but he kept walking, every step too loud, too visible, too real. Smile. Alexandra murmured through her teeth, the practiced curve of her lips never breaking. They can smell fear. He tried. It came out uneven, the kind of smile people use when they're told to pose for a photo after crying. He followed her lead to the center of the room, where the largest chandelier hung like a sun. She introduced him with precision, her tone casual, her body language deliberate. "Everyone," she said clearly. "This is my husband, Daniel." A soft wave of disbelief rippled through the crowd. A few heads tilted, some smiles tightened into polite masks. Daniel saw a man in a tuxedo mouth something to another. Probably who? Alexandra didn't flinch. Her grip on Daniel's arm tightened just enough for him to feel the faint tremor she was trying to hide. He understood then that her lie wasn't about pride. It was about survival. These weren't friends. They were predators dressed in silk and cufflinks, waiting for the scent of weakness. A tall man approached, silver hair, glass of scotch in hand. His handshake lingered too long on Alexandra's wrist. "Alexandra, you didn't tell us you'd finally tied the knot," he said. His voice carried the tone of a man who thought charm was the same as power. "And here I was beginning to think no one could keep up with you." "Some of us manage," she replied evenly. "Daniel prefers quiet victories." The man chuckled, eyes flicking toward Daniel's calloused hands. "Ah, strong and silent type. Refreshing." Daniel said nothing. He focused on keeping his breathing steady, on not embarrassing her. His boots felt too heavy for the marble floor, his shirt collar too tight. Yet when he glanced at her, Alexandra looked almost safe. There was a small, unguarded warmth in her eyes, like she finally had a shield. The night unfolded in slow, surreal minutes. Daniel held her wine glass once when she gestured, laughed when she did, nodded when she spoke. When the servers passed trays of food he couldn't pronounce, he pretended to know what to do with the forks. At one point, Alexandra leaned closer, whispering without moving her lips, "You're doing fine." "Feels like walking a tightrope blindfolded," he muttered. "That's business," she said quietly, almost to herself. The music rose again. Across the room, a group of men huddled around her father, a tall figure with eyes like winter steel. Daniel didn't need an introduction to know who he was. The man's disapproval radiated through the crowd. When their gazes met briefly, Daniel looked away first. Later, as applause broke out for a donation announcement, Alexandra's hand brushed against his. The contact was fleeting, but charged, an acknowledgement, or maybe gratitude. When the final toast ended and the guests began to drift toward the exit, Alexandra guided him toward a quiet alcove near the balcony. Her voice lost its corporate polish. "You saved me tonight," she said. "You have no idea what that means." Daniel shook his head. "I'm not sure what I just did. Pretended my life wasn't mine for 3 hours." Her laugh was soft but tired. "You were more believable than anyone else would have been." Then she hesitated, as if choosing her next words carefully. "This can't end tonight. They'll expect to see you again. Especially him." Her gaze flicked toward her father, who was still watching from across the ballroom like a hawk unwilling to blink. Daniel's stomach sank. "Ms. Hayes." "Alexandra," she corrected gently. "Alexandra," he repeated, the name awkward in his mouth. "I can't keep this up. I've got a daughter to think about." The word daughter landed between them like something sacred. Alexandra's expression softened, the CEO armor slipping for the first time. "I understand," she said. "Truly. You've got someone waiting for you. I just have something I can't lose." They stood in silence for a beat, the noise of the party fading into a dull echo behind the closed doors. She looked at him as if memorizing the shape of a man who had stepped into her world without wanting anything from it. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice low, sincere. "For tonight." Daniel nodded. "Just don't make a habit of asking strangers to play husband." Her lips curved into something close to a real smile. "Maybe I won't need to." He turned to leave, but before he stepped away, she said softly, "You made them believe in me." Daniel didn't know how to answer that. He simply nodded and walked toward the service exit, the hum of the ballroom fading behind him. He had no idea that this night, this absurd, impossible night, was only the beginning. The next evening, Daniel found himself back at the hotel, not by coincidence, but because Alexandra's assistant had called. "Ms. Hayes requested your presence," she'd said with the calm precision of someone who never asked, only informed. He could have said no. He should have said no. But curiosity and a faint sense of unfinished business pulled him back. When he entered, the ballroom looked identical to the night before. Same chandeliers, same glittering crowd. But this time the attention found him instantly. Whispers slid through the air, quiet and sharp. He caught the tail end of one. That's her husband? He could feel the invisible weight of comparison pressing down from every direction. Alexandra approached him like she had rehearsed every step, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of something raw. "You came," she said, relief hidden beneath her composure. "You asked," Daniel replied simply. "Didn't want to make you look like a liar." She exhaled softly, the kind of breath that sounded like gratitude disguised as control. "Just stay close. The board wants to see we're steady, right?" "Steady." He gave a half smile. "You're the one steering this ship, remember?" "Tonight," she said, "we steer together." The line felt too personal, but before he could reply, she looped her arm through his and guided him toward the cluster of executives near the stage. Daniel moved carefully, conscious of every step, every angle of posture, every sip of the champagne flute he didn't actually drink from. A tall shareholder, Winston, if Daniel remembered correctly, greeted Alexandra with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "So this is the mysterious Mr. Hayes," he said, extending a hand that felt more like a test than a greeting. Daniel shook it. "Just Daniel," he said, his grip firm. Winston's gaze drifted to the rough calluses on Daniel's hand. "You work with your hands, then?" "Yes, sir," Daniel said. "They build what other people imagine." The remark was simple, but something in Winston's smirk faltered. Alexandra glanced at Daniel, almost smiling, as if surprised he'd handled the subtle insult so easily. Throughout the night, Daniel found himself performing an unspoken choreography, pulling out Alexandra's chair, pouring her wine, nodding at the right beats of conversation. At first, it felt like theater, but slowly, it became instinct. There was something grounding about the way she looked at him when the others talked, how her expression softened for a split second, as though his presence allowed her to breathe. When one of the board members, an older man with the self-importance of royalty, decided to prod, Daniel could see Alexandra brace herself. "So, Mr. Hayes," the man began, "what line of business are you in?" "Construction," Daniel said plainly. "Ah," the man replied, chuckling to his colleagues. "So you build things." "Alexandra builds empires." "What a match." Laughter rippled around the table. Alexandra's jaw tightened. But before she could respond, Daniel leaned forward, his voice calm but carrying. "Empires don't stand without foundations," he said. "She's the architect. I just make sure it holds." The laughter died off. A silence followed, brief but telling. Alexandra looked at him, surprise flickering into something almost like pride. "Exactly," she said, regaining her composure. "And in this case, I trust my builder completely." The conversation moved on, but something had shifted. The mocking tone from earlier had faded, replaced by a tentative respect. Alexandra's hand remained on Daniel's forearm, a subtle anchor amid the sea of eyes and judgment. Later, when the lights dimmed and the final speech began, Daniel caught sight of Alexandra's father across the room. His expression was unreadable, part suspicion, part calculation. He sipped his drink slowly, never looking away from them. As applause erupted for the event's closing, Alexandra leaned close enough for Daniel to feel her breath. "You're better at this than you realize," she whispered. "I don't belong here," he replied. "Neither did I," she murmured, her voice low, honest. "Not at first." The crowd dispersed, the music softening into background hum. Alexandra's hand lingered on his sleeve a moment longer before she finally released him. "You should go," she said gently, "before someone asks where we met." He gave a small nod. "You sure you'll be okay?" "I was okay before you," she said, her eyes flickering with something that contradicted her words. "But thank you for pretending otherwise." He smiled faintly, unsure what else to offer. As he turned toward the exit, he heard her voice again, quieter now, almost to herself. "Sometimes pretending feels realer than truth." Daniel paused, but didn't look back. The marble floor reflected the chandelier's fractured light beneath his boots, and for the first time in a long while, he realized someone had seen him, not as a worker, not as a widower, but as a man. He walked into the night air, not knowing that the lie he had helped her build had already begun to change both of their lives. The night after the gala lingered in Daniel's mind like the echo of music after the band has packed up. He'd come home past midnight, bone-tired yet too awake to sleep. Lily had been curled on the couch under a blanket patterned with cartoon stars, the TV's soft glow painting her face in flickers. He lifted her carefully, tucking her into bed, whispering that everything was fine, though even he wasn't sure what fine meant anymore. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He could still feel the pressure of Alexandra's hand on his arm, still hear the brittle laughter of men who measured worth by the weight of their watches. He'd thought it would end with that night, the lie sealed, the favor done. But deep down, he knew better. Something about Alexandra's eyes before they said goodbye, that quiet, exhausted gratitude, told him this story wasn't finished. By the next afternoon, his phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Daniel Ramirez? The voice was crisp, professional. Miss Hayes would like to meet. Today, if possible. He hesitated. About what? She'll explain herself. He could have said no. But by 4 o'clock, he found himself walking through the glass lobby of Hayes Global Enterprises, his reflection swallowed by the scale of the place. The elevator music felt foreign, too polite. When the doors opened to the top floor, he saw her waiting. Not the woman from the gala, not the shimmering figure under chandeliers, but someone stripped down. No makeup armor, no audience. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. He shrugged. "Didn't think I had a choice." She almost smiled. "You always have a choice. I just hoped you'd make the same one again." Daniel leaned against the edge of the chair opposite her desk. "You said it would be one night." "I know," she said, her voice breaking its usual rhythm. "But things have evolved. The board's convinced now. They expect to see us together at next week's investor dinner." He let out a slow breath, rubbing the back of his neck. "Alexandra, I'm a single dad with a truck that barely starts and a rent bill I can't outrun. I'm not the kind of man who fits into that picture you paint." Her gaze dropped to the floor, then rose again, steadier this time. "I didn't lie because I wanted to impress them. I lied because this world still doubts women like me. Unmarried, young, leading a company my father built. They'd rather believe I have a husband pulling the strings than a woman standing on her own." Daniel studied her in silence. She wasn't asking for pity. She was confessing something raw, a truth too uncomfortable for her world to hear. "I get it," he said finally. "But lies don't stay still. They grow legs." She nodded slowly, accepting the warning like someone who'd already counted the cost. "I'll pay the price when it comes. But for now, I need you again, just until this deal finalizes. After that, you'll never have to see me." He wanted to walk away. Every part of him screamed that this was a bad idea. But then she reached for her bag and pulled out a photo. Lily, smiling from the gala's backstage, her little pink bow crooked. "You dropped this," Alexander said softly. "She's beautiful." Daniel took the picture, the air leaving his lungs for a moment. "She's my whole life." "I know," Alexander said. "And that's why I trust you. You have something real to protect." He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the CEO everyone feared, but a woman trapped inside her own invention. Alone, brilliant, cornered by expectations she never asked for. "You don't need me to make them believe in you," he said. Her eyes met his, unflinching. "Maybe not, but you make me believe I can survive them." Silence filled the office. Somewhere below, the city kept moving. Horns, traffic, lives colliding and separating. Daniel exhaled slowly. "Fine," he said finally. "One more night." Her shoulders relaxed just enough to betray relief. "I promise that's all I'll ask." He didn't believe her, but he nodded anyway. As he left the office, the late sun glinted off the glass tower, painting his reflection across its surface, a man out of place in a world not built for him. He walked toward the parking lot, wondering what line he had just crossed and why. Deep down, he wasn't entirely sure he wanted to go back. And somewhere high above, Alexandra watched from her window, her hand resting against the glass. For the first time in years, she felt something she couldn't categorize, something that looked suspiciously like hope. Saturday morning brought the smell of pancakes and rain. Daniel stood at the stove flipping a batch that leaned more toward burned than golden, but Lily didn't seem to care. She danced around the small kitchen in her socks, humming off-key, holding a wooden spoon like a microphone. He laughed quietly. "Careful, superstar. We can't afford another broken spoon." She giggled, swinging it like a baton. "You always say that, Daddy." "I always mean it." He poured coffee into a chipped mug and leaned against the counter, watching her. For all the chaos of the week, her laughter, the soft patter of rain against the window, felt like the only thing that still made sense. But the phone on the counter wouldn't stop buzzing. He finally answered. "Yeah, Mr. Ramirez," said the familiar voice of Alexandra's assistant. "Ms. Hayes would like to meet today. She insists it's important." He hesitated, glancing at Lily. "Can't. I've got my daughter." There was a pause, then Ms. Hayes said she'd come to you. Daniel frowned. "Here? That's..." The line clicked before he could finish. An hour later, a black car pulled up in front of his modest apartment complex. The contrast was absurd. The glossy sedan framed by cracked pavement and paint-faded mailboxes. Alexandra stepped out, umbrella in hand, wearing jeans and a gray sweater instead of her usual armor of heels and silk. She looked human. Lily peeked from behind the curtain. "Daddy, is that the lady from the picture?" Daniel turned, surprised. "What picture?" "The one you looked at last night." He froze. "Finish your pancakes, kiddo." But Lily was already opening the door. "Hi, I'm Lily." Alexandra blinked, momentarily disarmed. "Hi, Lily. I'm a friend of your dad's. Do you like pancakes?" Lily asked without hesitation. "I." Alexandra smiled awkwardly. "I can't remember the last time I had one." "Then you have to." Lily grabbed her hand as if declaring law. "We always share." Daniel sighed. "She's persistent. Gets that from her mother." Alexandra followed Lily into the kitchen, setting her umbrella by the door. The space was small, 2 chairs, 1 flickering light, but she didn't look uncomfortable. She watched as Lily chattered about school, her latest drawing of a castle, and how her dad once built her a fort out of cardboard boxes. "You draw?" Alexandra asked, leaning closer to examine the sketchbook Lily proudly held out. "Yep. Princesses, dragons, and sometimes my daddy." "What about your mom?" Lily's hand slowed on the page. "She's with the stars now," she said softly. "But she visits when we dream." Alexandra's eyes flicked to Daniel, who gave a faint, steady nod. For a long moment, the room felt suspended, 3 lives colliding, the space between loss and comfort narrowing. When Lily darted off to her room to fetch crayons, Alexandra whispered, "She's extraordinary. She's my reason for everything," Daniel said. "And she's the reason I can't keep pretending forever." Alexandra lowered her gaze. "I know, but seeing you with her, it makes sense now. Why you said no. Why you're different." He folded his arms, leaning back against the counter. "Different how?" "You don't want anything from me," she said. "Everyone around me does. Power, status, approval. You just show up. That's all I know how to do." She smiled faintly, tracing a finger along the rim of her coffee mug. "When I was Lily's age, my father used to tell me emotions were weaknesses to be managed, not felt. I believed him. Until now." Lily returned then, tugging on Alexandra's sleeve. "You can color one too. I'll draw you a crown." Alexandra laughed softly, a sound that startled even her. "I've never had one before." "Then today's special," Lily said. They spent the next hour hunched over the kitchen table, drawing castles and crooked rainbows. Alexandra's laugh came easier with each passing minute. Daniel watched, his chest tightening, not from discomfort, but from the strange, unguarded warmth in the room. When Alexandra finally stood to leave, Lily hugged her around the waist. "Bye, Miss Alexandra. You can come again, okay?" Alexandra knelt, brushing a strand of hair from the girl's cheek. "I'd like that very much." At the door, she paused, looking at Daniel. "You've given her something I never had growing up." "What's that?" "Safety," she said simply. Then, softer, "And maybe you've given me a glimpse of it too." She stepped back into the drizzle, umbrella snapping open. As she disappeared into the car, Daniel realized something had shifted, not just for her, but for him. The lie that once felt like a trap had become something else entirely, a bridge neither of them had planned to build. And somewhere in the quiet between raindrops and the sound of Lily humming, he wondered whether this was the first honest moment of all. Monday came wrapped in tension. Daniel had barely slept. The call came at dawn, Alexandra's assistant again, voice clipped, urgent. "Mr. Ramirez, the board meeting has been moved to 9. Ms. Hayes needs you present." He almost said no, but the tone left no room for negotiation. By 8:30, Daniel stood in front of Hayes Global's mirrored lobby, his reflection dwarfed by the steel and glass of a world that wasn't his. He dressed as best he could. Pressed shirt, borrowed jacket, boots scrubbed clean, but still undeniably workman's boots. The elevator ride to the top felt longer than it was, each floor another reminder of how far he was from home. When the doors opened, the conference room waited like a stage. Alexandra stood at the head of a long glass table surrounded by board members in dark suits. Her father sat among them, silver-haired and severe, fingers drumming the table like a metronome of judgment. He looked up at Daniel with cold curiosity, as if inspecting a crack in the foundation. "Mr. Ramirez," Alexandra said, her tone formal but her eyes pleading. "Thank you for joining us." He gave a small nod and took the seat beside her. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Her father broke it first. "We appreciate your presence, young man," he said smoothly. "Though I admit, we were surprised to learn of your sudden marriage." The word marriage carried a hint of mockery. Daniel felt the old instinct to lower his gaze, to shrink. But Alexandra's hand, hidden beneath the table, brushed his. "Just once. Just enough." Her father continued. "My concern, of course, is appearances. Investors value stability, not impulsive choices. I built this company on integrity, Alexandra. And lies, even well-intentioned ones, can dismantle it faster than any market crash." Alexandra's jaw tightened. "We've discussed this." "Have we?" he said. "Because from where I stand, you've let personal theatrics jeopardize decades of work. You're distracted. Emotional." The word hung in the air like an accusation. Daniel looked around the table. Some members avoided eye contact. Others smirked behind their pens. The same quiet cruelty he'd seen at the gala filled the room now. And for reasons he couldn't fully name, something inside him snapped. He straightened. "With respect, sir, that's not true." Every head turned. Alexandra's father leaned back slightly, surprised that anyone, let alone him, had spoken. Daniel's voice stayed calm, but steady. "You call her emotional. I've seen her hold her ground in a room full of people waiting for her to fail. That's not emotion. That's strength. You think this company stands because of tradition, but it stands because of people like her. People who don't quit when it gets uncomfortable." Her father's expression hardened. "And what exactly do you know about leadership, Mr. Ramirez?" "You're a construction worker." "Yes, sir," Daniel said. "And construction's taught me something important. The higher you build, the more you depend on what's underneath. Foundations don't ask for attention, but without them, everything collapses. Alexandra is that foundation. You just can't see it from the top floor." A hush swept through the room. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to pause. Alexandra turned to him, her eyes bright with something fierce and unguarded. Her father opened his mouth, then closed it again. The man who had built empires suddenly looked smaller, not from humiliation, but from the weight of words he couldn't easily dismiss. Finally, Alexandra stood. "He's right," she said quietly, but her voice carried power. "I lied because I was tired of being judged by a ring finger instead of results. I told myself it was strategy, but really it was survival. And maybe that was a mistake. But the bigger mistake would be pretending that the truth makes me weaker." She turned to the board. "You want to know if I'm capable of leading? Watch me. Not as a daughter. Not as someone's wife. As the woman who took this company from losses to record profits in 2 years. If that's not leadership, fire me." The room remained silent. One by one, the board members exchanged uncertain looks. Then one of them, a woman near the end of the table, spoke up softly. "I support Ms. Hayes." Another followed. Then another. The tide shifted, slow but unstoppable. Her father exhaled sharply, rising to his feet. "You've made your point," he said. His voice had lost its edge. "I only hope you know what you're doing." Alexandra met his gaze evenly. "For the first time, I do." As the meeting adjourned, Daniel stood beside her, unsure what to say. She turned toward him, her expression a mix of exhaustion and relief. "You didn't have to defend me." He shook his head. "Yeah, I did." For a long moment, they stood there in the echo of the boardroom's silence. Two people who had pretended their way into something neither had expected, truth. Outside the glass walls, the city stretched endlessly below, fragile, vast, and waiting for what came next. Weeks passed, each one gentler than the last. The gala photos had circulated through industry news, sparking gossip that burned fast and then faded, replaced by new scandals and mergers. But in the quiet corners of both their lives, something quieter, sturdier, and real began to take shape. Daniel still worked his construction jobs, still came home with sawdust in his hair and the ache of labor in his shoulders. Yet evenings felt different now. Sometimes, after Lily's bedtime stories and goodnight hugs, there would be a soft knock at the door. Alexandra, in jeans and a wool coat, holding takeout instead of champagne. "I figured we could trade the boardroom for noodles tonight," she'd say. He'd let her in, and Lily would always stay up a little later, eager to tell her about school or show her a new drawing. Alexandra listened with the patience of someone rediscovering what it meant to be in a home rather than just own one. One night, after Lily had gone to bed, Alexandra lingered at the kitchen table. "You know," she said, swirling her tea, "your daughter told me she's going to build a castle that reaches the clouds." Daniel smiled. "She says that every week. Sometimes it's a castle, sometimes a rocket. Depends on how much sugar she's had." "She'll do it," Alexandra said, her voice soft but certain. "She believes in everything." "You gave her that." He shrugged. "All I gave her is a life that's sometimes too small for her dreams." Alexandra looked around the modest kitchen, the mismatched chairs, the hum of the fridge, the drawing of a stick-figure family taped to the wall. "Small doesn't mean empty," she said. "This place feels alive." He studied her for a moment, realizing she meant it. "You ever get tired of skyscrapers?" he asked. Her lips curved into a smile. "Every day." Outside, rain began tapping against the window. For a long while, neither spoke. The silence was comfortable, like a language they both understood. Then Alexandra said quietly, "You never asked what happened after that board meeting." Daniel leaned back. "Didn't think I needed to. Looked like you handled it." "They approved the deal," she said. "And my father, he hasn't spoken to me since. But it feels lighter, somehow." She looked at him then, eyes steady. "When you stood up for me, you weren't just helping me save face. You reminded me who I am when I stopped pretending." He met her gaze. "Maybe that's all any of us need sometimes, someone to remind us." Alexandra reached across the table, her fingers brushing his hand. "Pretend you're my husband," she whispered again, the words gentle now, no longer desperate. Daniel smiled, the sound of rain filling the silence between them. "Maybe I don't have to pretend anymore." Lily's laughter drifted from her bedroom, soft, half asleep, like a melody that refused to fade. Months later, the three of them walked through the park at dusk. Alexandra carried Lily's backpack while Daniel hoisted her onto his shoulders, the little girl pointing at the sky, painted in streaks of orange and violet. "Look, Daddy," Lily said. "The castle's up there. Mommy's watching." Daniel felt Alexandra's hand slip into his. She didn't speak, but her grip said everything. That she understood, that she belonged, that this strange, improbable story had turned into something true. As they reached the edge of the park, the city lights flickered to life, the same city that had once seemed too big for any of them. Alexandra stopped to look back, her face illuminated by the soft glow. "You know," she said, "I used to think strength was about control. Now I think it's about trust." Daniel squeezed her hand. "And love." She smiled. "Love's the only thing you can't fake." They kept walking, the noise of the world fading behind them. For the first time in years, Daniel didn't feel like a man caught between lives. He was home, not in walls or promises, but in the space between a woman who finally allowed herself to be vulnerable and a daughter whose laughter healed everything broken in both of them. And somewhere far above, beyond the reach of chandeliers and office towers, the stars blinked in quiet approval. For Alexandra Hayes and Daniel Ramirez, the pretending was finally over, and the real beginning had just begun.